And now, dispatches from the General.
Are you there? Because I'm here. Life is especially hard right now, so I'm glad we're getting through it together. This quarantine, folks, the new way of living, staying home and podcasting and Zooming, who knows how long it could go on. I just changed my Twitter bio to Jeff Ross, sit-down comedian. But I'm adapting. Shout out to Snoop and Brad Paisley and Gilbert Gottfried, all the fans who've been joining my Insta roasts on Instagram Live during the quarantine. Making each other laugh and raising money for charity. Shout out to marijuanadoctors.com for donating money for everyone who gets roasted. So hit up my Insta Live on the weekends for some Insta roasting. All right. I haven't physically been out of the house in months except to walk this fucking rescue dog. Shout out to Rona. Thank you for your concern, everyone. Rona is getting stronger by the day. Her appetite is back. She eats all her food and everything we turn our back on or drop by accident. So, folks, some financial advice. If your vacuum cleaner ever breaks, get yourself a rescue dog. All right, shout out to comedy legend Al Franken, who's taken a break from his podcast to do this podcast. He's a very funny, smart dude, amazing insight in today's world. We'll have him up very soon. And at the beginning of the show and the end of the show, we'll have a roast in peace. Shout out to the great Little Richard. And shout out to magician Roy Horn of Sigfried and Roy fame, who recently made himself disappear. Ta-da! Let's start the show.
Get ready for Jeff Ross. Do you have thick skin? Let's all come together.
Woo! Hello, everybody. It's Jeff Ross here. This is Thick Skin with Jeff Ross. Feels good to talk to you guys. This podcast is cathartic, and thank you for being a part of it.
Man, it's always a pleasure to be here with you, buddy. This really helps me get through my week as well. This isn't just therapy for anyone who's listening or you, man. This helps me.
That's good to know. That's good to know. If you have something you think we should talk about on the podcast, write us. If you have a complaint, mail it to the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, at gmail.com. That's thickskin with Jeff Ross at gmail.com.
Yeah.
You had a crazy week this week.
I did?
I mean, it's so weird. I would expect you to be dead with nothing to do, but every time I call you, you're going to another meeting or a baby shower or a fucking. It's crazy.
I got a Zoom. What do you call it? Gig tomorrow and a Zoom corporate gig.
You hosted a Chrysalis event last night.
I hosted the Butterfly Ball virtually for Chrysalis, LA, a great charity here in Los Angeles that helps homeless people get back on their feet. Anne Hathaway and Jamie Foxx and Robert De Niro all made tapes, and I went live and kind of helped string it all together with Zach Braff. It was fun.
You were like, yeah, I'm doing this thing later. If you could, take a look at it. And I took a look at this, like John Favreau and Seth MacFarlane.
They raised $400,000. It was great.
It's unbelievable.
I was happy to be a part of it. Chrysalis, congrats. And I went to Rachel Feinstein's baby shower on Zoom.
Oh, our little Aunt Frank's all grown up.
And it was beautiful. She was there with her husband, Peter, and it was great. She's having a baby soon, and Marina Franklin and Yamanika Saunders organized it, and they made up some games, and everybody was making jokes, and that's it, man. We all cult up the comics. We are all like a big cult. We all get together. And it's just how life is, man. You got to celebrate life, because when things go bad, things go really bad, and we have 2 roasts in peace to do today.
This was a heavy week for gay entertainers.
Yes.
It was. It was a major hit.
Little Richard was awesome.
I mean, the innovator, the originator, the architect of rock and roll. I mean, this guy was it. He was one of the first music I ever listened to as a kid. You know, I did everything I could to learn the words to Tutti Frutti.
Bop, 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 bam, boom.
Tutti Frutti. Oh, Frutti. Man, Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, Good Golly Miss Molly, Lucille. Hits. Dude was a hit machine. All right, so let's hear it, man. Roast in peace, Little Richard.
A bop bop a loo bop a bop bam gloomy day. The great Little Richard has passed away. Little Richard was called the innovator, the originator, the architect of rock and roll. What he wasn't called was masculine, baritone, and subtle. Little Richard was one of the fathers of rock and roll, even though he dressed like my mother. Most of his biggest hits were named after women. Good Golly Miss Molly, Lucille, and of course, Long Tall Sally, who must have been deformed, poor thing. Little Richard was known for shouting in his songs and also when he saw a really nice blouse. I remember seeing Little Richard perform years ago. He dressed the way you think Stevie Wonder would dress. I still can't believe one of the first famous great African-American entertainers had a name that loosely translates to Tiny Dick. Whoo! Little Richard. Let's hope he's hitting the high notes in heaven. The great Little Richard. Rest in peace.
That was nice, man.
It was nice. I feel better. It was a tough one. Ed, I'm excited for this. Our guest today is someone I admire.
We got to get into this.
He makes comics look smart. He's a major accomplishment. He's Harvard educated. Part of the rock and roll comedy team at Franken Davis. He's Saturday Night Live royalty, one of the original writers, performers, SNL. Movies, TV shows, best-selling books. Huge presence in the United States Senate, making a big difference in America's health care and Wall Street regulation and mental health and schools and net neutrality and Native American issues. And he continues even now to fight for social justice and bring awareness to things he cares about. His new podcast is the Al Franken Podcast. And right now, like all of us, he's stuck inside, phoning in from quarantine. It's Big Comedy's Al Franken.
Yeah, you look great.
You know, I've been doing a little yoga, been trying to walk the dogs. My girlfriend's got me eating a little bit better. I'm not drinking because I'm not on the road. I just canceled the whole tour, and I'm broke and healthy.
Yeah, how do you feel not performing? Are you performing constantly?
I'll tell you exactly, and maybe you can relate to this because you've been through similar situations where you're on tour and then you're not on tour. And I thought a couple years ago, I took a 6-month break for the first time in decades. In my entire adult life, I didn't do stand-up. I took 6 or 7 months off. I shot a Netflix series, Bumping Mics, and when it was in the can, I was like, I'll do other stuff. I did some producing, and I started podcasting, and just had a little bit of a regular life. And I wanted to prove to myself that I owned it. It didn't own me. And I would drive by the comedy store, and I would be okay. So now here we are again, Al, and it's gone. It's an act of God. It's gone. Stand up.
Right.
I even changed my Twitter bio to sit down comedian. And I'm okay, man. I'm okay with it.
It was funny. I was just beginning I was doing like some theaters, and I was billing myself, as the only former senator comedian currently on tour. And it was so much fun. and I was getting I felt pretty good at it and pretty comfortable and having a lot of fun, and boom, it ended.
It's a very weird time. In the old days, I would call the old guys and go, "What's going on?" I'd call up Bernie Brillstein and say, "Is there any hope? Is life going to go on for show business?" And he'd reassure me. And now I go, "Huh? I think it's all going to come back. Like if you were doing a theater in Boston, and when this comes back, you'll sell out another show. I feel like everything is going to be missed."
I think. If we can, I think when people feel safe to do it, when it is safe, people will come back in droves. They'll want to be with other people, but it's all predicated on whether this does end and whether, this has been botched so badly that it's so sad and such a disgrace.
Be honest now. Be honest. Aren't you glad you're not part of this mess? So you don't have to live, that the whole state isn't relying on your decision whether to open or not, or whatever,
Well,
if you were a governor right now or a senator, you would not be playing with your grandchildren. You would have zero life. You'd be pulling your hair out.
I know I'd be very frustrated there, but I'm frustrated not being there because there's things that are making me very angry. I don't know why we didn't start having these hearings 3 weeks ago. I don't know why Congress didn't insist on testing. I don't understand, and tracking and tracing. It just doesn't make any sense. And we have, normally you have a coherent national plan when something like this happens in a crisis, but normally you have a coherent president, and we don't.
Right.
And he has abdicated any responsibility, and so it is up to Congress. And of course, the Republicans are in charge in the Senate. This week, for example, I have Steve Schmidt on
the Franken Podcast,
who was John McCain's campaign manager, but he's now one of the heads of the Lincoln Project, which are Republicans or former Republicans who are, doing everything they can to defeat Trump this coming November.
Do you think McCain would have really? Do you think things would be working out like this? Romney's the dissent all the time, but it doesn't have the impact that McCain would have, or does it?
Oh, you mean if McCain were here, or there now?
Yeah, I love John.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice to have somebody with some balls there. McCain and Schmidt says this. McCain could make him so angry, and McCain was a very complicated guy and by no means the perfect guy. But I had some great, when he went back to Arizona after doing the thumbs down,
right?
I didn't know if he was going to come back, so I said to him, because he had the brain cancer. So I said to him, John, I'm going to write you a bad news, good news joke about once a week. I'm going to send it to you.
Bad news, good news.
Basically, they were always in the form of Ron Johnson, who's this awful, awful senator, Republican senator from Wisconsin. Like right after McCain did the thumbs down, goes on a Wisconsin radio show and says, well, the reason he did the thumbs down was he was addled by his brain cancer. So I said, well, the bad news is you've got brain cancer. The good news is that Ron Johnson's ass cancer has moved to his mouth. And so, and I would write these, and then sometimes they're good news. Like the good news is your mother's 105 and sharp as a tack. The bad news is you have brain cancer. So,
He had a good sense of humor, didn't he?
Oh yeah, and so he comes back. He did come back again,
right?
And he walks into the chamber and he sees me, and says for everyone to hear, he points to me, he goes, that man earned every dime he ever made at Saturday Night Live, not here.
Oh man, that would have been a great roast. That would have been a great roast. That's a regret.
Oh God,
never get a McCain roast. That would have been that would have been a really great one.
Steve Schmidt. This was a fascinating talk I had with him, because this guy could go down easily as the worst president we've ever had. I mean, by just no contest. We were going to have, there was a pandemic, there's a worldwide pandemic. We were going to be part of that pandemic in the United States, as everyone is, but we didn't have to have an out of control pandemic. And it makes me angry, and it makes me wish I was there, because we have now, I mean, look, don't get me started. 1 out of 5 kids in this country now don't have enough food to eat. This is, we should be, people who lose their jobs should go right into Medicaid. They should get covered by Medicaid. There's no question about that. Medicaid expansion is one of the most the last 3 states to adopt Medicaid expansion by referendum were Idaho, Nebraska, and Utah. This is an incredibly popular thing. People in the red parts of Minnesota love Medicaid expansion. We should just put people on Medicaid when they lose their job.
Right.
If their employer doesn't, we should keep them in their jobs.
The thing about, I used to do these gigs for Trump, a long time ago. And you were living in New York when he was a big media personality.
Yep.
It makes sense from his brain to go, yes, we're open for business. It's the caterer, it's the hotelier, it's the guy in the service industry, the hospitality industry. Of course we're open. What are you talking about? Sure, there's some people who might not have a good time, but we're open for business. I mean, that is what you get when you elect a hotel owner for a casino owner. None of this surprises me. What surprises me is that we're not better equipped. Like how these giant corporations can't go 2-3 months without government help when we're all expected to go months and months without government help. I don't understand. I just don't understand why we weren't better prepared.
It's like these giant corporations, the oil industry. It's like, the oil industry suddenly, oil and gas industry, are suddenly, we need so much help. You guys have been raking it in billions and billions of dollars for years and years and years, and your former CEOs, executives are, worth hundreds of millions of dollars each. Why can't you just carry yourself? I mean, it's and you know what? It's just again, talking to Steve Schmidt. It's just about this Republican Party is captured by the plutocracy, and there's just a disgrace in this country, in the gaps in income, the income inequality, and the wealth inequality, and I just wish I could be there and fucking giving it to them.
Did you even see? And I know you're great at sniffing out a level of hypocrisy. Did you even see this coming? It's almost like, I don't know if you saw the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. These scientists lying to protect the Soviet empire. Sort of Gorbachev later called it the end of the empire, when scientists were lying to cover their asses with Chernobyl to the world stage. Now, these doctors that we see every day on TV, I don't know if you ever in your time in government dealt with these sorts of scientists and government officials. Now, could they be being held back or filtered from saying what they really think?
Well, let's make some distinctions, because I think this is a very interesting thing to follow, which is Fauci
Right.
and Birx.
Right.
And I had another public health, a Lena Wen,
Right.
who was the public health commissioner for Baltimore. She's on CNN and
Right.
MSNBC all
She
the time.
worked for that mayor that went to jail or got in trouble
Yes,
for writing a
So there
children's
was a
book and
parallel.
funneling the money. God.
Yeah, she did a self-published book and she was mayor of Baltimore, pocketed $800,000 by forcing these organizations that depended on the office of the mayor, made them buy her book. And so she was crazy.
She also made $800,000 on a children's book. She's smart in a lot of ways too. I mean, who the hell?
But here's the thing. Lena was her public health official, and this woman was nuts. And it's very parallel to what Fauci and Birx are dealing with, which is they have a nut, and so they have a choice to make. They have this choice, and I think Fauci and Birx are approaching it differently, which is they can, they can get fired, and if they do, then
they can talk freely.
Well, here's the problem: who's going to be talking not just to the president, but to the people around the president? So they're making a calculation, and it's a difficult calculation. And the calculation is, if he gets rid of me and gets rid of Birx, he's going to replace us with someone who is incompetent,
right,
and is a toady. And
so they want to be the adult in the room, if you will.
Exactly. And so they have to thread this needle, which you can't thread. And Fauci, of course, one of the reasons I was calling for hearings was that you saw Fauci gets in front of a hearing. They're going to ask him questions. It was in my old committee, the Health Committee, Health,
right.
Education, and Pension Committee. Senators are going to ask questions that where he has to answer them truthfully, and they're going to narrow it down to a point where he has to say something, a lot of stuff that the president doesn't want him to say. And of course, very predictably, the president lashed out against him.
Right.
I think there's a calculus to the extent that Trump can follow a calculus where he's going like, if I fire him, what is that the end of me? I mean, it is fascinating to watch.
Do you think he immediately says to somebody that we'll never meet, find out what you can find out about Fauci in case I need it? Do you think that there's compromise going on in this administration? Do you think they have something on everybody or they look for something or they'll make something up?
A lot of people ask me about Lindsey Graham. How is it that he just and so I always say in answer to that, I go, well, they have something on him, and it's kind of an open secret in Washington. He is a pathological shoplifter. He's a compulsive shoplifter, and they have him on tape lifting a gravy boat from Pottery Barn, and the people. He knows that the people in South Carolina are very religious,
yes,
and they're very forgiving, but gravy means so much,
right,
to the people in South Carolina.
Yeah, well, that must be it. Well, it's good that we have an exclusive here, right from the FBI files.
So the inside scoop.
You ever met that Fauci guy?
Oh God, yeah. I knew him pretty well because of during Ebola, and some other stuff. I got to know him. I really, really admire him. And Tom Frieden, who was head of the CDC, I got to know him really well. I actually played squash with him fairly regularly, and he. These guys somehow the CDC just fucked up this time really bad. And
why do you think that is? Why? What? Did they? Was there really a playbook that they dismissed? Is that really? Is that, or is that like something they just say?
What they did was, first of all, the guy he appointed is a little bit of a right wing nut. So, and I think there's a lot of, and also he defunded a lot of the programs. Like they had much more people in China. They also got rid of. The reason we caught Ebola was that we had CDC people all over the world, and they caught it. They identified it before it got out of control, and they were really good. What they did here was they fucked up. They didn't take the World Health Organization test, which was a good test. The CDC always does their own tests. Their test fucked up. It didn't work, and it was because they didn't follow their own guidelines and safety. And one of the elements was contaminated. And instead of then saying, "Okay, we fucked up. Let's take some other country's test," they went back and did it, and it just was this huge delay. And of course, there's no urgency from Trump, and he still isn't doing.
Well, can I ask you something? Then why if Congress, the Republicans and Democrats are so divided all the time, and we always know that, then why isn't there a plan in place for an emergency? Why do they have to negotiate during an emergency? Why isn't this where they hit a button and go, okay, release the plan that we always the pandemic plan? Why they go? Should we bail out the companies first? Should we bail out the people? Like, why is there any debate about why isn't that like a FEMA thing where they always know the National Guard's going to go to this explosion? And
because there's always explosions, there's always floods, there's always tornadoes, there's always fire. This is, this hasn't happened like this in 100 years. Now, of course, the scientists, the people who are in this field, knew this was bound to happen sooner or later, and we're saying that all the time. I mean, I had a guy on, Larry Brilliant, who was one of the epidemiologists who eradicated smallpox, and he gave a TED talk in like 2006 saying exactly this is going to happen. Jeez. And so did Gates, and I mean, they knew this, and Obama put in the NSC, the National Security Council, put a pandemic response team, and Trump got rid of it. I mean,
I think he had to get rid of anything that he didn't start because he had to have like this fake loyalty. Like if you look at anybody, we talked about the adult in the room. Once they're gone, there's only two. There's either people that are donors, big money donors, or they're like on some like.
Well, every administration has put people in, certain ambassadorships that are low stakes ambassadorships that are big donors, and it's just that this president gutted the State Department. One of the people I had on was Michael Lewis, and Michael Lewis wrote this book called The Fifth Risk, and it came out over a year ago. And what the book was about was the transition from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. And it had been a tradition in transitions that to appoint this transition team and for the outgoing administration to really prepare for the transition, and for the incoming to really take it seriously. And that didn't happen. And Trump had the attitude. Chris Christie was in charge of the transition, and then he got fired as soon as they won the election because Jared Kushner hated Christie because Christie was a federal attorney who put his father in jail. And but Trump didn't like the idea of spending any money at all on a transition because it was coming out of his campaign before the election. And so he just said that he said to Christie, listen, you and I can figure out the government we can take an hour after I win the election. We can leave the victory party and plan the government in the next hour. And that's how little understanding and regard he had for what the enterprise of the federal government is. And
fucking unreal.
And it's so irresponsible what he has done, and he's so just the sickness is there every day. And this whole thing about Obamagate, and it's like my 6-year-old grandson. It's like he put Obama.
So I'm saying he's trying to write a new act, and it's not a good act. He needed to. It's like when you start out in show business, you do shows with other comics, and then now he's the president. He should be like his act should be foreign governments, but he makes Putin, he makes the dictators his friends, and so his act has to be his enemies at home, and it's lame. It's a lame act. It's not a second term act. The reason FDR went 4 terms is he had all these arch enemies out in the fucking world. He had to go stay and take them on and fight tyranny. And Trump's the other way around, going, hey, there's a lot of good oil wells in the Middle East. Let me.
I talked to when we talked Schmidt about the two presidents, the two great presidents, Lincoln and FDR, and how they saw us through these huge crises, and the resilience that these guys had, and the suffering that each of them had done in their lives, and then this fucker. Okay, but don't get me started.
See, isn't this fun, Al? You get to say whatever you want. You get to tell stories. Isn't it fun being in comedy again?
It is. Comedy. I got to tell you a story. So about Dianne Feinstein. I was in the Senate like a week,
right?
And Harry Reid was the majority leader,
right?
And we're at the caucus lunch, and he asked me to get up and speak. So I speak for about 10 minutes, and I'm good, and I get like a standing ovation. And I go back to my table, and I was sitting next to Dianne Feinstein, and she looks at me and she goes like, when you first came here, I thought you were going to be stupid. and I said, why? Well, because you're a comedian.
Oh, man.
And I said, well, comedians are pretty smart usually. And she goes, I don't think so. Because usually what they say is pretty stupid.
Wow.
I'm going like,
how could she be so...
Okay, it's over. We don't need to talk about this anymore.
How could she say that? By the way, it does remind me, like, you being a senator, it kind of... The one that I would love to meet and talk comedy once is Vladimir Zelensky, the guy who runs the Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
I did a deep dive into this guy once on YouTube. He's funny.
Yeah.
Like a funny guy made it to the top of his country. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that was another thing that just friggin' fried me. The dishonesty of the Republicans then
Come
saying
on, Al. Let it
like,
go. Let it go. It's a perfect phone call. It was a perfect phone call.
the Republicans would say things like, Zelensky said he wasn't being shaken down. Well, that's because he's relying on Trump for military assistance for the survival of his country, and you know that. Stop saying it.
We got to find that guy, Zelensky. We got to like do a show with him one day.
Yeah. Well, not now. Well, we can get him on Zoom. I mean, or FaceTime.
Are you still a Democrat, Al? Do you still consider yourself a Democrat, or are you sort of a freewheeling into?
Well, I have a reason.
You're your own thing now.
I have a reason to be mad at most of my former Democratic colleagues in the Senate, but I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I feel strongly about this. I feel strongly in the way Steve Schmidt, who was a Republican, feels about that the Republican Party does not operate in good faith, and that and that the problems that we see in this nation, the problems have been exposed by this pandemic. Show the failures of this country, and part of that is we don't have a healthcare safety net like every other damn country.
Right.
And every other damn country has universal healthcare. They also have private insurance. So this isn't necessarily that you have to have, single payer with no private insurance. You can have single payer with private insurance.
Right.
There's lots of ways to skin this cat. But we just do not. Other countries take care of the workers who are paid, who have been laid off during this. We just have, these Republicans. I knew that when I was there, they were not operating in good faith. And Mitch McConnell is the biggest is a cynic of the worst order.
So what is that, Al? Now that you've seen it so face to face, when people do anything, they get
power.
It's power. So
it's power.
And they somehow justify it as well. Better I'm here than somebody else, even if I'm compromised or doing something.
I don't know. He's so cynical. I don't even think he thinks that.
So why can't the Democrats get a little bit of that this time? Now, sometimes the liberals eat their own. Sometimes
no. I mean, believe me. You're talking to someone who's in someone's digestive tract. Still, So I have no love lost for many of my former colleagues. That said,
you're on the team,
and I wish some of my colleagues had more guts, and I wish that they weren't so careerist. And I wish, and there are, former colleagues in the Democratic Party I didn't like before this happened to me.
Right.
But and the Republicans I kind of liked. But I there's no question to me that the country will be a lot better off if this president goes and the Senate is in Democratic hands, and so we can start getting some judges in there who aren't Federalist Society judges, and that we can start passing some legislation that will help the people in this country who, we're seeing how this is affecting minority voters, African Americans, Latinos, people who are poor. We see how it's disproportionately affecting them. And there's just something basic wrong with our country that needs to be addressed.
That we're sick. Now, just to pick up on the last big point you made, and something I wanted to ask you about, the Republicans, I feel like they'll do anything to win, and that's a big reason that they win. The Democrats won't do anything to win. And now maybe they're going to have to do whatever it takes. People can translate that into whatever they think that means. But some people are willing to cheat to win. And in an emergency, you got to cheat to win. This is an emergency. We can't be pointing fingers at each other all the time and like I said, eating our own. I hope we come out of that part of it. I hope we've come out of that part of it. We took everything for granted for so long. We had, and now when it starts to be taken away, you see what happened. You had the day after Trump got in office, you had women marching in the streets. It wasn't the day before. It was the day after he got elected. Like, this is our midlife crisis. This is America's midlife crisis. I had an uncle who had a stroke. And I was ready to say goodbye to my Uncle Joe. And then a year later, you see him, and he's eating healthy, he doesn't drink anymore, and he's fit, and he's probably got another 20 years. I'm wondering if this is our midlife crisis as a democracy, or is this the end? Tell me something hopeful, Al.
A lot of it depends on how you're talking about them cheating. Voter suppression.
Right.
Is one of the things I asked Schmidt is, you just left the Republican Party. You just left the Republican Party in 2018. What the hell took you so long? and because he worked in the Bush administration and helped. He part of his job was getting Roberts confirmed and getting Alito confirmed.
Right.
Roberts wrote Shelby County, which overturned the Voting Rights Act. These guys, they made the people in Wisconsin, when Milwaukee was thick with COVID, have to show up and vote in person instead of being able to cast absentee ballots that may have gotten in after Election Day, but were postmarked before Election Day. And they did this in the most cynical way. And it was 5-4. It was the 5-4 Supreme Court. They are just, and we need to do this. We shouldn't need to cheat to do this, but we got to play hardball.
Right.
Between playing hardball and cheating. And that's why I had Mark Elias on, who's the lawyer for the Democrats, to go over exactly what we need to do. And when the courts are he blocked Merrick Garland. That's the cynic. That's McConnell.
Right. I love your brain, Al, but I could use some comedy advice. I'm in a comedy team sometimes. With Dave Attell, we do a show called Bumping Mics on Netflix, where we go up together and we kind of do our thing. And when we make each other laugh, we bump mics. And, we kind of go on and off, and I kind of have to do what Dave says because he's the funny one, right? So I have to. He
is funny, very funny.
He's the best, and it raises my game. But sometimes, he'll want to do something, or he'll be in a mood, or he'll snap at me right before we go on. And you were in one of the most successful comedy teams, when I was starting to watch Saturday Night Live and getting into what I consider rock and roll comedy, like the Blues Brothers and Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy, people who played arenas. Like, I watched them as a kid, but I rewatched a clip the other day of you with the Grateful Dead. It's one of the funniest clips. My cousin and I, we were dying laughing. And it's on YouTube.
What was that? Us trying to get Jerry to introduce us.
You're wearing tuxedos, at the Radio City Music Hall. You're backstage.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special evening with the Grateful Dead.
We're your guest hosts tonight. I'm Al Franken. Thank you.
And I'm Tom Davis. And Al and I are both backstage right now And this is where all the action is going to start very soon.
Now, you see these backstage passes that Tom and I have. These are very, very difficult to get, but we got them because we're a lot more important than you are.
You're not allowed to eat the food backstage, even though you think you are, and then you go in to talk to.
I grab a rib, and then go into Jerry's dressing room. And the whole point is to ask Jerry to introduce us in front of the crowd. We're supposedly opening for the Dead,
right?
And then I hand Jerry the rib and pick up his guitar and drop it. Yeah.
Hey, Jerry, this is a beautiful, beautiful guitar. Sorry, man. I'm really sorry.
Hey, man. God damn it.
Sorry about that. Listen, Jerry, we're going on stage in a couple of minutes. Would you introduce us?
I can play music, but I can't do any of that kind of stuff.
Well, we don't want to.
Sorry.
How about you, Phil? Huh?
Never for you people.
And it goes like it's basically that.
Well,
then we finally end up in front of the crowd, and we just say, "We're Franken Davis. We're going to do an hour of comedy."
Oh, you don't want us to do an hour of comedy? And then the crowd, and they're half in on it and half completely baffled. It's so funny. And then
and we say, "Hey, if you don't quiet down, we're just going to get off and introduce the band."
Hey. What? You don't want us to do an hour of comedy? Hey, listen. If you people don't quiet down, we're going to get off the stage and the band will have to come on.
Tom and I were big Dead.
What was it like pitching a bit to Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir and the band?
Well, it was kind of funny. They just asked us to do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it was like one long camera shot, so I feel like you probably had to do it a few times.
It was interesting. It was one single shot.
I was very impressed.
Yeah, I was. When I look at it, I go, "Geez, that's pretty damn good." And
it's almost a perfect comedy bit because it's self-deprecating, but yet it's also like backstage pass at a Dead show for real, and then you walk out to the real crowd, which is like something like you would see Sacha Baron Cohen do today, like basically just riling up this crowd. And then, of course, like...
But they're kind of in on it. They're in on the joke. We play ourselves as assholes who are going to go on, and unless one of the Dead introduces us, they're going to hate us. And we just offend every one of them, and then finally we just get Brent, the guy who replaced the last keyboard player who died, who'd been with them for a few months, to introduce us, and he goes on and goes like, "I don't know who these guys are, and I doubt they're funny. Franken Dave." And
long live, yeah, and then you got, it's so funny.
But it was a lot of fun because they did 3 sets. They usually do 2 electric sets, but they did an acoustic set and then 2 electric sets. And our job, because this was broadcast to 15 theaters around the country. Only the Grateful Dead would do something weird and stupid like this, but it was at 15 theaters. So we were the entertainment between the sets. And we did a thing. The conceptual idea was we were raising money for Jerry's kids. And we had like a poster boy for Jerry's kids. And he was a guy who fell out of the second deck at the Spectrum, a Dead show. And, went to Egypt when they were stayed there, didn't get in. And, and... So it was, and of course, these were our heroes, the Dead. And so it was an unbelievable thrill for us.
Wow, that's cool, man. That's really cool. That's cool. Since we're talking about the Dead and I'm in a legal state, do you mind if I smoke? Well, for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Aha.
Long live Jerry Garcia. I love that.
Yeah.
And he was so in on the bit. It was a great bit. So here's my question. Is there a trick to getting along with a comedy partner? Because I get in a lot of tension with my partner, and he's a great guy. He's a generous guy. But, you know, it reminds me of like when I was starting out, asking Buddy Hackett told me that they asked him to be in the Three Stooges, and he said he wouldn't because he needed the money and all this, but they wanted him to replace somebody who was sick in the Three Stooges. And he said, I don't want to wake up every morning wondering how the other guy is feeling. So when you're in a comedy team, you know, you're in a marriage.
Yeah. I mean, Tom and I, my daughter's name is Thomason Davis Franken.
Beautiful.
So we were, you know, we started in high school together. And we started doing gigs in high school at a local, you know, theater. And, you know, we went through a lot together. And in the end, we split up at a certain point, and it was over. He was, he has written about it. He was you know, your garden variety alcoholic who did a lot of drugs, and I did an intervention on him that didn't work, and so we split up. And then he, I don't know, about 7 years ago, I guess it was, he was diagnosed with cancer. Given about a year to live or something. He lived 3, and it was very moving. He grew up incredibly, and the way he went out and he became incredibly grateful for his life and for his friends, and was an inspiration. And so I actually gave a speech on the floor as
when he passed away.
Yeah. And
do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I told stories about him, and I read something that he had written about death that was hilarious.
I'm going to look that up.
And I remember Harry Reid, the majority leader. The next day I was sitting in the Judiciary Committee, and I got a tap on my shoulder and said, you know, Harry Reid's on the phone for you in the anteroom. And okay. I got on the phone. Harry said, you know, I read your speech for your friend, and it was remarkable. And then he started quoting the thing Tom had written. And it was like, and the thing I'd read that Tom had written, and he just was like, dead people are people too. You know, and then he said, dead people have fought in all our nation's wars. Was one of the lines. And Harry just went, that's brilliant. And
do you think Tom?
Yeah, but Tom was so fucking funny. And you know, when we broke up as a team, I went, uh-oh, the funny one's gone.
See?
You know? And
I'm a believer in 1 + 1 is 3. If both people are funny on their own, that's an undeniable team. And I was watching you guys. I was watching the Rolling Stones bit you did. Was that shot at 8H? Was that shot at?
No. That was at a college. We did it was a Showtime special, and so it was just at this college in New Jersey. And
that's another level of act. Is that how you opened your act?
No,
you're on a full band.
I think it was we did an intermission and came back with that.
Amazing.
I think.
God.
That was a who knew.
That must have been so fun. Jeez, what a fun bit. Just become the Stones after intermission. Like, that's something, like, you know, everybody goes, well, maybe I'll pivot to my family material. And you guys are like, oh, fuck that. How about we just get a band and I'll be Mick Jagger and you'll be Keith Richards, and we'll just do it exactly the way the Stones do it. And then the crowd will just be able to be at a Stones concert for 10 minutes. So cool.
Yeah, that was a kind of a shocker for people who saw it, because it was like, what?
Right.
And but Tom was a really good guitarist.
And, he was.
Yeah, and he loved Keith Richards, of course, and that was, I will say though, being a team is one that we were Bob and Ray. We loved Bob and Ray.
Right.
And we were very influenced by Bob and Ray. I'll tell you a story. So we used to do this bit. It was just a very Bob and Ray bit about a French restaurant. When we did colleges, like we do like Shadron, Nebraska. And we go to college there, and we go like, until recently, Shadron was considered pretty much a culinary wasteland. But our next guest has opened a fancy French restaurant here in Shadron. Please welcome Pierre Lafranc. And he goes, welcome, Pierre. He goes, well, it's good to be here. Alan, whoa. Pierre Lafranc, you don't sound like, well, I was born Bob Johnson. But when I opened the restaurant, and it's just very, very Bob and Ray. And so we did the bit on Letterman. Right. And you remember that Chris Elliott was on Letterman.
Of course.
And Bob and Ray would show up every once in a while. Chris is Bob Elliott's son. And the late Bob Elliott. Bob passed a couple years ago.
I love Chris Elliott and his daughter. They're such a funny family.
Abby, yeah. So we go to, like, a couple of weeks after we do this French restaurant bit on Letterman, there was a Christmas party for Letterman. The Letterman show had a Christmas party. We go, and Bob Elliott's there. And Bob comes up to, well, I saw your French restaurant piece. And I said, well, it was kind of an homage to you guys. And he said, you didn't say so.
Yeah. Can't argue with that.
It was so him. I mean, I was just in awe of those guys.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
But a guy doing a single, you can go places if you're by yourself that you can't go if you're a team. So I really.
You mean creatively?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, it's just a different beast, and I've been doing. That's what I've had to do since Tom and I broke up. When I've done that, when I was a senator, I didn't do much stand up, and I watch. You're unbelievably great. I remember we did a fundraiser, in 2016,
right,
and you were just fucking killed. And every time I've seen you, you always kill, and you always and are loose and go where you want to go and bring people up, and you do things that a team can't do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, or they could. It's just a different beat.
That is the one part of when I'm with Dave, I go faster, but then that part of it, I do kind of go slower, and it does make me really love my live solo. You got to hold on to that. Well, that's good advice to think about, at least appreciate it. So it is very special when I'm in the team, you know that. It's like, and you did so much stuff on your own, and it's almost like being in a band. That's how I feel. I do feel a little cooler when I'm in the team than when I'm by myself. And then I see you guys, and like I saw Tenacious D, Jack Black and Kyle Gass's thing. They're a musical comedy team, and I'm like, I did a show once at a music festival at Bonnaroo, and I thought I was cool because I was the comic in the tent doing 1,000 people, doing my own thing, roasting people. I played some guitar. I did a very sort of, live event show. I felt really good. And then I walked down to the main stage, and Tenacious D is just two fat guys like me playing for 40,000 fucking people. So I was like, it's the music. It's the comics that do the music. They're the ones getting all the big crowds, all the action. You know, at the end of the day, I'm really just like I'm funniest, just by myself maybe, or one other person. You know, I don't know.
Well, it's something you have done.
It's making me
for
miserable.
Decades, and that you are so comfortable in and so confident in for every good reason that, and it's almost just pure fun for you. You know, one of the things about Trump, remember he'd say, everybody else is low energy.
Yeah.
But I've thought about this. The only thing he would do in the campaign would do these rallies.
Right.
And that's the only thing. He'd get picked up by a limo, driven to Teterboro, get on his plane, eat on the plane, get picked up by another limo, go to the talk, go in front of 25,000 people and just go up there and riff.
Right.
Which he's very talented at.
Right.
And
he's like Larry the Cable Guy.
Yeah, and that it gives you energy. It doesn't take energy, really. It just gives you energy, and that, to me, like when he did, like, we're gonna build a wall, and Mexico's gonna pay for it. That was like his Hot Pockets,
right?
That was like Gaffigan's Hot Pockets. It just killed, and so then he had to do that. And of course, Mexico wasn't going to pay for it, and of course, it's stupid to build a wall. and
don't you think the act
is down because of his Hot Pockets?
Don't you think the act is getting old? I mean, I feel like, there's comedians that you've seen, and then by the third special, that you're like, why didn't they really pivot into something a little different or something, surprise your audience? You always want to surprise your audience. Don't you think the Trump act is, let's take out politics and think about it as an entertainer now. It seems like this is the third time doing the nursery rhymes, and it's time to put on a new act here. And
it's sickening now. It's sickening, but it's also with the overlay of 85,000 people are dead, many of whom wouldn't be dead if he'd simply read his presidential daily brief.
Daily,
yes.
I think that's your joke.
That's I did a tweet.
You told me that the other day.
Biden pledges to read presidential daily brief daily. And it just like it's insane.
Be careful what you tweet, Al. You could get. It's not safe out there, Al. I'm warning you now that you're newly unleashed on the world with the comedy and the tweeting. I'm warning you. It's not safe. I stopped
with the comedy, with the tweeting,
with the comedy and the tweeting. Your mother and I have been warning you. Al, enough with the comedy and the tweeting. It's not go to law school. I told you. Why did we send you to Harvard so that you could do with the comedy and the tweeting? Alan. Can I ask you, on this show, I remind people to stay positive, okay? I say life is hard, but we're getting through it together. This is even harder right now for a lot of people, obviously. I try to offer advice on how to get through the blues. That is the theme of the show. Now, I know that you're good enough, smart enough, and people like you, dog.
Oh, the Stewart, yeah.
But maybe you can channel, just to answer this question, because this is that time, Mr. Smalley.
Oh, okay, Stewart.
You don't have to, but
I will do it for you.
You don't even have to do it. What I'm just saying, what would that part of you even, Al? What when you would write that, listen, how do you snap out of a funk? What I do is I have certain things. I'll turn on Rodney Dangerfield and just listen to it almost like music, and he sounds so miserable. And So, and I've heard you talk about dips of depression in interviews. And is there something that you can tell the people out there that are quarantining, that are miserable, these college kids, these Olympians, they must be in despair right now, Al.
Oh my God. To give up, you give up so much.
What do you do? How do you pull yourself out of these out of a funk? Your show business,
well, I did.
politics.
I mean, after what happened to me, I did. You know, it was tough. It was rough. And your job is just to get through it. But it's, you know, and
keep on keeping on, keep on trucking.
Yeah, and my easiest way through it was to work, was to, you know, try to do something of value, and also try. I go back to comedy a little bit. So there's some project I can't talk about really that I'm working on that I'm very happy doing. So I can write. I mean, I have the.
Don't do Mick Jagger. Whatever it is, you're not going to do Mick Jagger anymore, right? That's done, right?
No, it's me as fat Mick Jagger. No. I'm not going to get into it because it's not. It's pathetic when you talk about something that doesn't happen.
Well, no. I guess the point. I guess the point is that you get creative when you're pulling.
Yeah, but I mean, I have that ability. I have that, you know, and I have my family. I have my grandchildren, my wife, and my kids, and I'm lucky in that way. And I'm not going to a food pantry, and I try to be grateful for the things you try to be grateful for things you have. But this is crappy. This is fucking crappy. I mean, obviously it's good to exercise, but some people live on a huge property where they have a swimming pool and a tennis court, and they have a gym, you know. I live in an apartment building where they have a gym, but I'm not going to go to the gym in the apartment building.
Not now.
Not now. And so, you know, I'm not really one to, okay, I'm going to, I don't know what to do to exercise. I do some push-ups and I walk a little bit, but.
Do you ever lay on the ground and try to do stretch and do yoga? It's very good for when you're quarantining, stress release. Everything's in your hips and your shoulders. I highly recommend it.
I do stretch a lot, and but yeah, I guess it's time to pick up yoga, and it was time to do that 2.5 years ago.
No. It's never too late to get in touch with your body. This is one. I know I sound corny and ridiculous, but yoga is a lifesaver, especially if you're like, you know, running around, grabbing the grandchildren. You pull your back. You want to be able to just not think twice about moving around and quarantine. This isn't just to you, Al. This is just to people. I highly recommend getting on the floor, doing 3 or 4 poses, get the blood flowing. Don't lose your mind during quarantine.
Well, as long as you're doing that, how do you? What do? You get something online or you get a video?
People make this mistake. They make the mistake of trying to do it along with the video. The better way is to watch the video so you learn the moves, and then you lay out on the floor, on a carpet, on a mat, and you do it, replicate it as best as you can, slowly, and try to remember and just remember the moves. Don't try to do it in real time with a real good yogi on a video. It doesn't have to look good. You just have to get that blood flowing and do 3 or 4 moves a day. That's my little 5 cents.
Okay, I will do that starting tomorrow.
I love that. I love that. Just lay on the ground, and if you want to FaceTime me tomorrow, I'll do it with you, and I'll teach you a couple good stretches. We hold all our tension in our back and hips, and there's a pigeon pose, which is great, especially when you're like at your desk a lot and you're reading and you're on Zooming. I'm telling you, man, it's a lifesaver.
I do actually stretch a lot, and I have one of the things that Harry Reid, the majority leader and then minority leader, was fascinated with is that I would always when I was at lunch. I'm very flexible, and I don't know if you can see it here, but let me see. I do this. I would eat lunch like this.
Okay.
And Harry was going like, "What? How do you do that? You see this? Shoot."
That pose that you're doing, the way you're crossing your legs.
Yeah.
For our listeners, Alice has his right foot up high over his left knee. So it's a stretch, essentially. That is pigeon pose. That's where you're so if you were on the ground doing that and that foot was underneath you and your forehead was on the ground, it would feel so good. I'm going to change your whole quarantine with this.
Okay. Well, that's how I read on the floor. I sit on the floor and read.
That's good.
I always have. I always did my homework in school sitting on the floor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that a little more often too.
And I've been very proud of that. And I was told by a masseuse that my ligaments are too loose.
Too loose? Loose ligaments?
Oh, thanks.
Well, you look great. I see you on FaceTime and I see you posting pictures on your Instagram. It's a lot of fun to follow you, Al. Al Franken, congrats on your new podcast. I'm really enjoying it. Do you like doing it? It's cathartic, right?
It is. And I get to talk to as you do.
Who's been your worst guest?
I'm trying to figure out who is my worst guest. I start every show by saying, like, hey, everybody, we got a really good one. And for a change, and
I like that.
This time I mean it, and but
I'm going to dedicate this conversation I had with you. I'm going to dedicate it to Jerry Stiller, who is
oh my God,
a great guy.
What a sweetheart! And I wrote a little thing when Tom and I first did the improv back in 1973.
Huh.
There aren't many comedy teams. There just aren't, and there never were.
Stiller and Mira,
a great comedy team. And when we started doing the improv in '73, we would drive down from Boston on weekends. Tom was staying near college, and they were so encouraging and so supportive to us. And, we're the only other comedy team, but they're Stiller and Mira. And they were great. But beyond that, they were the sweetest.
It was crazy.
Nicest, most positive.
It was crazy.
And encouraging and all the way back through my political career, too. Just amazing.
I roasted Jerry Stiller, and it was one of my first big producing jobs. And he let me know that he thought getting roasted at the Friars Club was like the equivalent of an Academy Award for a comedian, and how much the event meant to him. And I helped him book it, and I helped him write everybody's material, and we stayed friendly afterwards. And I really was like, wow, a nice guy really can make it in show business. It really opened my young, naive eyes up to like, wow, he sent me a present afterwards. I learned all about, I was raised by wolves, Al. Like I had no... I didn't, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and like I didn't know anything about thank you notes and Chanel scarves as a present, and I have none of the pedigree to be in show business like a star, So to me, I'm learning on the go. It's a happy accident. And Jerry Stiller had this like just this Hamish thing about him, and he winced at all the dirty jokes, but he still he was a great sport. And I had my most Jerry Stiller, you have the face of a star, and that star is Lassie. Got it. Look back, Jerry Stiller. This is rare. Normally, the Friars roast people that are in show business. Yeah, I don't know. It was fun. I don't know. He was having a big moment. He was playing George's dad on Seinfeld at the time, so it was a really epic night. And I love that he was nice in the 70s at the comedy club to you. That's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, just out of their way. Just went out of their way. Somebody's got you.
Big hug to Ben and Amy Stiller. Al, I had a blast. I feel so much better talking to you. You're so much fun to talk to.
You too, and you've been so nice to me in every way, and just a good friend.
Thanks, Al.
So thanks.
I really have a lot of affection for you and a lot of respect for you. So
wish I could say the same.
You really got off easy, and now you've poked the tiger. You didn't need to do this, and I didn't make fun of you at all. And I'm, all right. I'm going to give you a pass because I see you have empty shelves behind you, and I know times are tough. If you need me to send some deli over, I will. I know a good one not too far from you. Al Franken on Instagram. He's a great follow.
Show me a couple moves tomorrow.
I'm going to show you a couple yoga moves. And check out Al's podcast. I listen to it on iTunes. Where do you like people to find the podcast, Al?
Wherever you get your podcast. Isn't that what you say? That most people say?
Wherever you get your podcast, listen to the Al Franken podcast. All right, pal. Thanks so much, man.
Okay, you too.
All right.
Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks, Al. All right, Ed, you met Al Franken.
That's a bucket list right there, man. That is really cool. He is, as someone who started off comedy and sketch comedy, and especially violent sketch comedy, Murder Fist, Al Franken and Tom Davis, that was their jam when they came into SNL. They brought the blood and they brought the guts. They brought the,
right.
They made it funny when everyone else was going soft and clean. They made, violence, like bloody, the Dan Aykroyd sketch of putting his hand in the blender and stuff. Julia Childs, like they did it. They broke it open for us.
Interesting.
And
you met Tom Davis.
I met Tom Davis once at UCB Sketch Festival, New York Sketch Festival. And he was doing an interview or a talk with Chevy Chase. And my sketch group Murder Fist went on right after them. And then I saw that he was in the green room at UCB. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to pass up my opportunity to be in the same room as Tom Davis. And so I went in there and I just started getting ready. In Murder Fist, we used to have this thing called blood condoms, which is basically an unlubricated condom filled with stage blood. And we would pop it whenever someone got shot. So it looked like blood squirted out sometimes to get on the audience. And I knew if I started like making condoms filled with fake blood in front of Tom Davis, he would naturally ask me what I was doing. And so I got to teach Tom Davis how to make a Murder Fist blood condom. So that is now that I've met Al Franken, I'm gonna quit. And
you met him, both a great comedy team.
I mean, Al Franken, man, he is the goal. He's a comedian that became a senator. That's insane. Comedians aren't even allowed to win Academy Awards.
That's true.
Much less
that's a good point.
Join the government. It was beautiful, man. I'm so happy you had him on. He's a treat and an inspiration.
That's awesome, buddy. I did feel compelled, and a lot of this is because our magician pal Bernie Shine has been really upset about losing.
I mean, he lost one of his own.
These magicians, they really think comics are like a cult. These magicians, they know each other's secrets and they keep each other's secrets. So with no further ado, Roy Horn, roast in peace.
cadaver, Roy Horn, one half of the magician tiger training Las Vegas flamboyant duo Sigfried and Roy that had a residency at the Mirage for decades, has passed away. Roy, if you didn't know, he was the dark-haired one who also was the half of the duo that was attacked by the tiger Manticore while live on stage. All right, Jeff.
Poor Sigfried lost his partner, Roy Horn. Now we'll have to find a new horn to blow. Roy would always put himself into a box, and then he would always manage to escape. And until now. Sigfried and Roy were from Germany, so it figures that they had a fondness for white tigers, the master race of all tigers. Most white tigers are actually inbred and have Down syndrome, so they are kind of like supremacists. White tigers are extremely rare. It's even rare to be bitten by one on a Las Vegas stage. But after the tiger bit Roy in the neck, the tiger dragged him off the stage. I empathize, to be honest. I've sometimes had the urge to do the same thing when I work with David Tell.
Oh, come on.
The tiger that bit Roy Horn was named Manticore. I think he was pissed off at Roy for naming him that. A Manticore is a mythical creature that has the body of a lion, the face of a human, and the sting of a scorpion. But enough about Rosie O'Donnell. I saw the Sigfried and Roy show in Las Vegas. Roy wore tights, and it looked like he had a loaf of bread in the front of his pants. Talk about misdirection. Couldn't take my eyes off it. Well, eventually every magician makes himself disappear. Roast in peace, the great Roy Horn.
No. Crocus pocus.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Bernie.
That was a fun show. Thank you, Bernie Shine, for sending in those great jokes, man. So, plugging away, man. AlFranken.com for all things Al Franken. At Al Franken on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure you check out the Al Franken Podcast. He's got a bunch of books out there. And, he's an all-around really smart guy. But if you really want to get into it, look up some of those old Franken and Davis bits on YouTube. They're hilarious. I spent the day looking at them. Also, the 1996 Correspondence Dinner. He was killing it all across the world, man. Jeff, dude, these Insta roasts are crazy. I love them. It's like a celebrity green room at the Oscars in the comment section. I've never seen anything like it. It's
too much fun.
It's at any time anyone could pop on. Snoop Dogg popped on. I started screaming and made Julie stop cooking and come watch.
Was that Snoop Dogg? I thought that was Snoop Dogg. I saw the follower count pop up. I was like, oh, I think this is really Snoop Dogg.
It is crazy how fast just Snoop shows up and there's posse of 12,000 people behind him.
It is crazy. It is nuts.
So if you want to check out these Insta roasts, Jeff does them every Saturday and Sunday. Pay attention to Real Jeffrey Ross on Instagram for what time they're going to be. It kind of changes every week. So pay attention there, and he will let you know. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock.
It's a good bet.
Pacific time. So 8 o'clock on the East Coast and really early in London. Go to roastmastergeneral.com.
4 a.m. in Lithuania. We had some people from Lithuania.
Really?
Iran. Yeah. Mexico.
I feel like if you
Ireland
did this at 4 a.m, it would be prime time for them, and you would have just as many people watching.
Yeah, I think so. It's crazy, man. Everybody's home. The world is closed for business. Everyone's home right now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's awesome, though. It's everyone who's watching it is just you just look at the comments, and it's just people just this makes me feel so happy. Thank God he's doing this, and it's literally a treat for an hour every day on the weekend. So don't miss it. It's too much fun.
Thank you.
Roastmastergeneral.com for all things Jeff Ross. Go pick up your emotional support human shirt there. And I'm offended by people who are always offended baseball tees. Check out Jeff on Cameo. This is the best gift to get anyone who isn't getting married now or is missing a birthday. You get a cameo from Jeff. He will roast them a little bit about whatever they're missing, and I guarantee it'll make them feel a little better. Rate and review us on iTunes. Subscribe on the YouTube page. Email us at thickskinwithjeffross@gmail.com. Twitter at thickskincast. Instagram thickskinwithjeffross. Real Jeffrey Ross on Twitter and Instagram. At EddieTunes_ Twitter, EddieTunes on Instagram, and check out my other podcast, The Brighter Side, with Amber Nelson and Eddie Ewing on the Last Podcast Network.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Had a good time. Shout out to you as individuals. Be nice to yourself. We'll see you next time on Thick Skin.
You know what? I think this is the best show I've ever done. And you know what? I deserve it because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.